Owen Clark had almost not come. The invitation had arrived 3 months ago, a formal notice from the Scytheran Empire thanking him for his service during the border conflicts and requesting his presence at the Imperial Memorial Assembly. Owen had assumed it was a bureaucratic formality, some automated system flagging his name from old service records and generating a polite form letter. He'd spent 30 years trying to forget the war. Not because it haunted him, but because he'd moved on. He'd gone back to Earth, finished his education, spent decades teaching conflict resolution at a small university. The border conflicts were history, footnotes in textbooks, and Owen had been one medic among thousands. But curiosity won, and maybe a small part of him wanted closure. So here he was, standing in the grand entrance of the Scytheran Imperial Palace, clutching a printed invitation and feeling profoundly out of place. The palace was impossible. Crystalline towers rose into clouds that seemed to part around them. Gardens defied gravity, floating in geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. Scytheran nobles moved through the corridors in ceremonial dress that made Owen's simple formal suit look like something he'd borrowed from a discount store. A steward directed him to the Grand Assembly Hall with minimal conversation. Owen was told to wait until his name was called and given no further explanation. The hall was vast. Thousands of seats arranged in concentric circles around a central platform, where the Queen's throne sat elevated above everyone else. Owen found his assigned seat in the back section, surrounded by other minor guests, retired officers, low-ranking diplomats, people who were here out of courtesy rather than importance. He settled in and waited. The ceremony began with speeches, long ones. Scytheran commanders recounting battles, planetary governors praising the Empire's strength, nobles offering condolences for the fallen. Owen listened politely, recognizing a few names and locations from his service, but mostly feeling disconnected from the grand narrative being constructed. This wasn't his war. Not really. He'd been a medic, a negotiator, someone who patched people up and tried to keep them from killing each other. He hadn't won battles or shaped policy. Then the tone shifted. The announcer began reading names of individuals being honored for exceptional service. Most were Scytheran officers receiving posthumous commendations. A few were allied species commanders. Owen half listened, expecting the ceremony to end soon. Then he heard it. Owen Clark, human medic and negotiator, attached to Neutral Zone Outpost 7. Owen froze. That was him. They were calling him. He stood awkwardly, murmuring apologies as he squeezed past other guests. He started toward what he assumed was the stage, though he had no idea what he was supposed to do when he got there. And then Queen Savara rose to her feet. The movement was so abrupt, so unexpected, that her advisors visibly startled. The entire hall fell silent. The Queen's voice rang out, clear and sharp, and filled with something Owen couldn't identify. He has arrived. The hall erupted. Nobles turned in their seats, whispering frantically. Guards moved uncertainly, hands going to weapons they didn't draw. Advisors clustered around the throne, speaking urgently in voices too low to hear. Owen stood frozen halfway down the aisle, completely lost. What was happening? Guards approached Owen with a deference that made absolutely no sense. They gestured for him to follow, not roughly, but with the careful formality reserved for someone important. Owen followed because he didn't know what else to do. The Queen descended from her throne. Based on the gasps echoing through the hall, this was not normal. This was not protocol. She approached Owen directly. Up close, she was tall, elegant, with the long ears characteristic of the Scytheran and eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "You do not remember me," she said. It wasn't a question. Owen stared at her, searching his memory. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty, I don't. 32 years ago, Neutral Zone Outpost 7. My unit was ambushed. 17 soldiers trapped behind enemy lines. Supplies gone, no reinforcements coming. You found us." Owen's memory clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. He did remember. A desperate extraction mission. A group of Scytheran soldiers pinned down in hostile territory. He'd negotiated a temporary ceasefire, convinced both sides to hold fire long enough to get the wounded out, and then he'd stayed behind as collateral until the evacuation was complete. You stayed, the Queen continued, her voice thick with emotion. You let yourself be captured so we could escape. You were held for 3 weeks before your people secured your release. Do you remember? I remember, Owen said quietly. But I didn't know. I never learned what happened to the soldiers I helped extract. We moved to a different sector right after. I was one of those soldiers, a junior officer, barely 20 cycles old. She stepped closer. My advisors told me you were killed years later in another conflict. I grieved. I have carried the memory of what you did for 3 decades, and now you stand before me alive, and I can finally say what I have wanted to say since that day. She turned to address the entire assembly, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. This human saved 17 Scytheran lives, including mine. He did so knowing it would cost him his freedom. He did so without asking for reward or recognition. Everything I have become, everything I have built, exists because Owen Clark refused to leave us behind. The hall was silent. Every eye was on Owen. I was just doing my job, Owen said, because he didn't know what else to say. No, the Queen said firmly. You were being extraordinary, and today the Empire acknowledges that debt. The ceremony transformed. What had been a formal memorial became something far more personal. Scytheran officers approached Owen, many of them veterans who remembered him from the war. Some had been patients he'd treated. Others had been on the other side of negotiations he'd conducted. They thanked him, some with tears, others with the restrained dignity of warriors acknowledging something beyond words. The Queen ordered that Owen be given the Star of Preservation, the highest civilian honor the Scytheran Empire could bestow. It was reserved for those who had saved the royal bloodline. Owen tried to protest. The Queen cut him off. You saved my life. You saved the lives of soldiers who went on to serve this empire with honor. You negotiated peace in moments when others would have chosen violence. You treated Scytheran soldiers with the same care you gave your own people. That is not ordinary, Owen Clark. That is extraordinary. Later, in a private audience away from the crowds, Owen asked the question that had been burning in his mind since the moment the Queen stood. Why did my name cause such a reaction? The Queen's expression softened. Because I have spent decades searching for you. When the war ended, I tried to find you to thank you, but your military records were incomplete. I was told you had been killed in a subsequent conflict. I grieved. And then, 3 months ago, your name appeared on a memorial guest list, flagged by an automated system cross-referencing veterans. I could barely believe it. You've been looking for me for 30 years. I have led this empire for 20 of those years. I have made decisions that shaped billions of lives. But I have never forgotten that I only have the chance to make those decisions because a human medic refused to abandon people who were not his own. Owen felt something shift in his chest. I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you became who you are. As am I, and now, finally, I can thank you properly. That evening, Owen stood on a palace balcony overlooking the Scytheran capital. The city stretched to the horizon, lights glowing like stars against the darkening sky. He held the Star of Preservation in his hand, feeling its weight. He'd spent 30 years thinking his service had been ordinary. Just another medic doing his job. Just another negotiator trying to stop people from killing each other. But the Queen's words echoed in his mind. The gratitude of soldiers who remembered him. The shock of an entire assembly when his name was called. Small choices. Staying behind. Negotiating instead of fighting. Treating every life as worth saving. He'd never thought of them as heroic. Just necessary. But they'd rippled forward in ways he'd never imagined. The Queen joined him on the balcony, standing beside him in comfortable silence. History will remember the battles, she said finally, but I will remember the medic who stayed behind. Owen smiled. That's enough. And it was, because human impact wasn't always loud or obvious.